Hello and welcome to Maine Law Matters. I'm Lee Softly. I'm currently serving as the President and Dean of the University of Maine School of Law. I will be your host in a series of monthly interviews with people who have had a positive effect on Maine law, the state's only law school, on the Maine legal community, and our country. We hope you will find the individuals as fascinating as we do as we go through this interview series. I'm delighted that our inaugural interviewee is none other than S. Peter Mills III. Peter is a 1973 graduate of Maine Law with a career that represents the very best in public service. From Harvard to the Navy to Maine Law, from legal practice to the legislature to the Maine Turnpike Authority, Peter's brilliance, humor, and collegiality are well known, and I am honored that he has agreed to help us kick off this project aimed at preserving for our students and future members of the legal community the very best of our profession. Peter, welcome to Maine Law Matters.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
So, Peter, let's go way back. You come from an extraordinary Maine family, and you have Maine roots that are very deep in the Maine soil. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
My earliest memories are of my father coming home from World War II and living in Farmington, where my whole family came from, basically. And my father and my grandfather were both attorneys in town. And my dad had to leave after Pearl Harbor and went into the Navy for a long time. But my grandfather was a lawyer in town, and I used to hang around him quite a bit. And he would make me read from the law books when I was 6 years old, just to show off to the clients that he had a grandson that could read. And he had a big dog, it was an enormous dog, and when I was 5 years old, I would ride on the dog. I mean, something else. But he had also trained the dog to take mail down to the post office, which was about a block and a half away from the law office. And the dog would. He would put it in his mouth, and he would disappear for about 20 minutes and deliver the mail into the post office until the clerks sent back a note and said, you know, we can't read some of the addresses because he's slobbering on them. And he had to stop.
So, Peter, where are you in birth order?
I'm the number one child out of 5. Number 2 is my brother, David, who died about a year ago and had no interest in becoming a lawyer. That was refreshing in its own. The third one in order is my sister, Janet. I was the first one to run for governor, and then I complained that I couldn't win. And she says, well, let me teach you how. And she says, first of all, you become a Democrat. And I said, oh.
She never talked you into that.
Well, she did. And in fact, frankly, current times would drive you to that anyway.
So you, then David.
And then Janet.
Then Janet.
And then Paul,
who's
who became a lawyer and went to the University of Maine Law School and took over the family practice that my father and grandfather had started many years ago, and still runs it.
And the baby of the family?
It was my sister Dora who decided medicine was for her.
Was much more exciting.
And for her own daughter, by the way. And I just remember my mother was born, she only wanted to be an English teacher, and she wanted to run, she eventually became the leader of the English department in a couple of different high schools in different portions of her career. But all I remember, in those days, you could not teach if you had tiny children at home or if you were pregnant. And all I remember is when I was 17 years old, she came in the door and said, damn it, I'm pregnant. I can't teach this year. It's a major setback for her, at least for a year or two. And that was Dora, who actually became one of her best friends and traveling companions.
So your dad was a lawyer and your mother was an English teacher. Is that why all of you write so well? Was your mother paying attention to your writing?
My mother decided that school began at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we got home and showed her what we had written that day in school, and she would say, "Sit down." We would go over it all.
Wow.
And we never stopped getting tutored by her, all of us. And she did it at a time when she was not able to teach because she had small kids at home. And so she took it out on us by sitting us down and teaching us not only the parts of speech, but how to use them all. And it was very intense. My mother was an intense teacher.
We all agree we could use a little bit more of the intense English teachers these days, but let me move you to a fascinating question. Is it true that your grandfather was originally named Peter Butler Mills, but his name was changed to Sumner Peter Mills after the abolitionist Charles Sumner?
Yes, Charles Sumner, for whom the Sumner Tunnel is named, by the way, among other things. But Charles Sumner was a famous U.S. senator from Massachusetts and was Abe Lincoln's best friend and a very powerful advocate for freeing all slaves and putting it right into law. And he wrote the laws and handed them off to Abe Lincoln and said, let's get this passed. And he was there right until the end. He was there holding Abe Lincoln's hand as he was dying.
Wow.
And was very close to him. And he was assaulted one time on the floor of the Senate by somebody who was offended by his speech about freeing the slaves. And a Southerner beat him with a cane. And he had a bad head concussion. And so bad that he was fairly wealthy. And so he paid his way to go over to London for treatment of the brain injury. And at the same time lobbied Great Britain from not buying any products from the south of the Mason-Dixon line, put them out of business because we're at war with them. And he was very effective.
How old was your dad when your grandfather?
My grandfather was a babe. My grandfather was born, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, Charles Sumner died of natural causes. And my grandparents, if you follow this, were so fond of him, as were many people in Maine and Massachusetts. He was a favorite of many, many people. And they went right down to the town office and changed the name of my grandfather to Sumner Peter Mills. Well, my father picked it up as the second, and then I got given it as the third. And my daughter, Kate, was 57 now, but she adopted a couple of kids from Morocco, and the first one she named Sumner Peter Mills.
Wow. That's wonderful.
Anyways, there's a lot of fondness for Charles Sumner, and recently there are at least 2 books I'm familiar with that have written about him and about the significance of his role in actually starting the war.
So your dad was very much involved in politics, and you have several times indicated that his relationship with his Republican Party was occasionally fraught. Did he talk to you about all of that?
He accepted. He was very fond of Margaret Chase Smith. She was so close to the family. I remember he was taking her out to politic in 1948, and I was 5 years old, I think. And I was sitting up front where I could see out the windows. And my mother said, "You get out of there and get into the back seat so Margaret can have that seat." Margaret spoke right up and said, "No, Peter needs to see out so he can have that seat." I remember this. I was 4 or 5 years old. And she was very, very close to the family, but she also, her philosophy about what it means to be a Republican, or to be a good politician, let's put it that way, was very much adopted by both my father and my grandfather and my mother.
Talk to us a little bit about what that was. To be a good Republican then, what did it mean? There
was a fellow named Joe McCarthy who was a rabid, radical Republican and was making a bad name for the party and for himself, frankly. And Margaret Smith wrote the famous speech called to reveal what was on her conscience, and she nailed him from the floor of the Senate. And I was allowed to stay home from school and watch it on television, black and white television.
So to so many of us in the law, Margaret Chase Smith's Declaration of Conscience.
That was the speech.
Was inspirational, has always been inspirational.
It's often
and
used.
You were riding around in a car with her as she was campaigning throughout the state of Maine.
Yeah, my dad and my grandfather spent a lot of time escorting her to different places.
What do you remember of her? Was she, I mean, she clearly cared about your ability to see the state as you rode around. Was she a warm person?
Very much so. And she tried to get me to go to the Naval Academy. And then when I got into Harvard, I called her up and I said, "Can I not go?" And she said, "Of course you cannot go."
You cannot go.
She was very gracious. I was nervous as a cat. I thought, my God, she appointed me to the Naval Academy. I've got to go. And I knew it was free, and I had 4 younger siblings. But I also got a scholarship to Harvard, a Navy scholarship at that. It paid my way through Harvard.
So let's talk about Harvard. What was it like?
It was scary for someone who came out of Farmington and Gorham. I went to high school in Gorham, Maine. And Harvard was intimidating. It was partly because it was so huge, and the numbers were so, there were so many people in your class and not in your class. Just so many students running around. But I got used to it.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I look back, I got to a point where there was a course catalog that was about 3 to 4 inches thick, telling you about all the courses that you could possibly take. I got to a point halfway through when I said, I think I'd be perfectly happy if I could just stay here the rest of my life and finish the book.
Did you have great professors?
Yeah, I did. And many of them were phenomenal speakers. And were sometimes people would go to hear them year after year, even if it's the same speech as last year. And it was worth doing.
So that was a great start. Yeah. What happened as you left Harvard?
I got on board a Navy destroyer because I had the condition of having my education paid for by the Navy was that I would give 5 years to the Navy as a naval officer. And so I started out on a naval destroyer. I spent a great deal of time going to Vietnam and back.
What year was that? Do you remember?
1965, 4th of July.
Oh, you remember it specifically.
I went to New York City. The ship was there. I went on board with a big duffel bag, and that was the beginning.
Did you have any training before you went on to a destroyer?
Yes, I spent 2 summers
During Harvard?
Yes, in midshipman training, and there was a lot of training. And they gave you the option of training with the idea of becoming a Navy pilot if you wanted to. I did that for a summer and decided, no, I like the ship better. You had the option of being a Marine. And I thought, no, I like the ship. I like machinery for some reason, and I took to it. I really, really liked the destroyer. You had to learn everything about the ship, and that appealed to me.
So this was 1965, and you eventually spent quite a bit of time off the shore of Vietnam.
On board a destroyer, this was not a pleasant thing to be doing, but we launched a lot of artillery over the heads of the Marines that were on the beach near the edge of the water. But we sent a lot of heavy stuff inland to wherever anybody could see or suspect that there was enemy activity. And I got to thinking, why are we fighting this? They didn't like Chinese communists any more than we did, but they wanted their own version and their own independence. I was glad to, after 5 or 6 years, to be reassigned to doing something else, and it was the best job I've ever had in my life. I was the 3rd senior officer on board. I was what they call the senior watch officer. It was my job to drive the ship any time there was any challenge to maneuvering the ship. And boy, my favorite job of all time was driving a destroyer.
So that was early 70s?
It was 72, 71. And they assigned us, this was phenomenal, to go spy on the Russians in the Western Pacific because they were inventing new forms of missiles. And we were there to watch the missiles come down, the missile heads come down, and they said, record everything you see, everything that goes on out there, and write it all down, keep charts of it, map it out, tell us where those warheads landed, exactly where they landed. I was in charge of gathering all of that. We found out that they were able to shoot 3 warheads at once on one missile. It recorded all of this, charted it all. I went a week without sleep and wrote a long report on what we had found through the testing that we were observing. And the answer was, proceed, Pearl, best speed. Get back here. So I got to the top of the ladder, and when the ship came in, our ship came in and tied up, and there was a high-ranking Air Force. He wasn't a general, but he was pretty close. He says, "Are you Lieutenant Mills?" I says, "Yes." He says, "Where is your drawing?"
Really?
I gave it to him. He gave it to Richard Nixon, and Nixon said, "This is trouble." The Soviets had developed something that's very threatening, because those 3 warheads that they put on top could come down in a pattern that would take out our missile silos running across North Dakota and Minnesota. And in other words, they were first strike weapons, and they would prevent us from retaliating. The whole thing was in Time magazine.
So Peter, you were right in the middle of all of the espionage that helped the United States.
Well, it was scary, and the Time magazine article, which I still have a copy of, it was interesting because it said a lonely destroyer out in the Western Pacific discovered all of this.
Without computers. You didn't have AI, certainly.
No, we did it with radar.
You were drawing it.
We had radar.
Radar.
We knew where the splashes occurred because we could pick up the reaction.
And then you were making...
And we plotted it all with great precision. I mean, I had a lot of help, but we did it. Nixon took the information and went to Congress and said, "I need some money because we have got to take on this new threat." And they didn't know what the threat was until we brought it back and showed them. It was a very exciting thing.
When I say to people, Peter Mills has been in the middle of very important things for very many years, it started right then. That's pretty extraordinary.
They gave the whole ship a Navy Commendation Medal.
Wow.
Yeah. It was exciting. You can imagine how much more rewarding it was than to be lobbing heavy artillery over the heads of the Marines into the villages of Vietnamese people. I never understood why Jack Kennedy didn't come over, grab a hold of the guy running North Vietnam, and say, "Can we talk this through?"
Wow.
I think he could have. I think Jack Kennedy could have. And indeed, successive presidents did try, but never succeeded.
So why did you leave the Navy?
I had ambitions to go to law school. And I got into Cornell, and then I thought, no, it's too expensive, and it's way up in northern New York, and there's this new law school in Portland, and I thought, well, that's where I want to be. And then I met Ed Godfrey, who
inspired so many people.
You could not say no. And I just was easy to come back and go to a school that it was brand new.
So this was 1970.
I was in the class of 73, meaning so I must have started in 69.
And were you on, you weren't in the new Round Building until your last,
no, I spent 2 years at the old hospital building, and we all loved it, by the way. I don't know what it was about it, but the building was charming.
Do you remember in your 1L year any of your professors?
Yeah, I think I remember them all.
Tell us.
Well, I'm not sure I'll pick up the names of Jerry Petroselli. Was always somebody to. I enjoyed the classroom banter.
Banter.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. A lot of my classmates did not. And I don't mean about Jerry, but they didn't enjoy the challenge of having to respond
Yeah,
to almost anybody.
right.
And it wasn't just Jerry. I mean, there was some very tough, we had some very tough professors.
Cold calling has never been a popular thing at law school.
Yeah.
So Jerry was there then. Who else was there?
Dean Godfrey taught trusts, and he also took students in. He was a bachelor, and he had a big house, and he played bridge very well. And if you were single and you didn't have a place to live and you were in law school and you didn't know where, and you could play bridge.
Place to live.
And there were a number of them that I remember.
That's right.
Who did.
One of my classmates
Yeah.
was one of his lodgers.
Yeah. So there was a lot of care taken not just by him, but the school was very good at watching out over you.
What did you think of the round building when you moved into it?
Those classrooms, the pie-shaped classrooms where everybody was facing the center where the professor was teaching from, it was actually a well-designed, some of the rooms were very well designed for the function.
Except none of them had any natural light.
Well, the building had its shortcomings.
It did, but you were happy to be in the round building.
Yeah, we thought we also got our little desks up in the top. There was a lot of room for desks and things. And the library was big. So, I mean, we had nothing like that in the other building. And so it was a major expansion to accommodate the numbers that we had at that time.
So as you went into 2L and 3L, did you do any externships, internships while you were there?
In the first summer, Professor DeLogue hired two of us to help him write a piece that he had a contract on water issues. Water, I don't know what kind of, I can't remember much about it at this point. All I know is that at the end he said, I've got to quickly do a précis of it. I can't, this is too long. And he gave it to me and he told me to cut it down to, I don't know what, 10% of what it had been, which I did.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he gave us challenging things to do. And I remember coming in the first week of September, school had not started yet. And I came into the building. This is the old building. And Ed Godfrey was there alone in the building, and he was practically in tears because one of his favorite young professors and that professor's spouse had both died in an airplane crash.
Oh, no.
And he lost one of his best people.
Oh, Lord.
And the spouse whom he liked also.
Yeah,
I mean, she was very congenial. And I just remember standing there with him. I was the first person to see him. He had just received the call from the airline.
Wow.
They were vacationing in Alaska and went into a mountain. The whole plane went into a mountain. And the professor was well liked by all of us. And so we started the year off with not missing out on somebody that we'd all come to like.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it was, it was an emotional year.
Talk to us a little bit about Ed Godfrey, who actually established Maine law.
Yeah, he was hired he was a very well-respected professor in a large law school in New York State, as I recall, and he came to Maine to lead the genesis of this school. And he had friends in very important places. He had a friend, for example, at the Harvard Law School who was the librarian. And he says, "If you got any spare books?" And the guy says, "Drive down here." He did. He was taken into the basement. There were thousands of books. The guy said, "These are all extras. Take what you need." My God, he came back with a full library for this little school that he was starting. And it was a good library. Those books were not, they weren't ratty or anything. They had just, Harvard bought too many. And he picked them up. And then he did the same thing. He was very good at recruiting younger people to be professors at the law school. He could tell who was a good student And if he could find somebody, it didn't matter that the person was still young, but if they had been an extraordinary student, like Jerry Petrocelli was. Jerry used to say, I think he would say it again if I asked him to. He says, "Yeah, one of the things I could really, really do, I did bar exams. I did. I could write them."
Wow.
Well, not only could he write answers, but he could write new ones, challenge all of us. No, he was just extraordinary. And he went to BC, and when he graduated, the dean, Godfrey, recognized
that talent.
He grabbed him. He said, "Get up here and start teaching everybody else." Well, he was my age. I was a student. And I'd been in the Navy and everything, but he was my age, and I had the deepest respect for him. Still do.
So Dean Godfrey not only had all the right connections, found wonderful faculty, found the library, he also managed in a very short order to obtain ABA accreditation for the law school.
In less than 3 years, which was unheard of. He got the school accredited. And I can't remember, there were some real magic tricks there, but I can't remember the details. It's just that he knew that was important. He regarded it as important, and went barreling ahead to get it done, and impressed all of the people that had a say in it. And he did he was the founder of this school without any question.
And Maine Law has maintained that accreditation since the mid-'60s,
and it's
straight through 3 buildings. We're in the 3rd iteration of Maine Law.
Well, in the stature of the school, the ratings, there were all these external ratings, not too many, but there's several leading ones that we all pay attention to. And the school has elevated itself over the last few years very successfully to be regarded nationally.
It is now number 88 in the country, but who's asking? So let me take you back to 1973. You were graduating from law school with a pretty extraordinary class of soon-to-be lawyers. Do you remember many of the people you graduated with?
I'm 82 years old, and my ability to remember names is horrible.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. Was Cap Powers in your class?
Yes.
And Derry Rundlet?
Yes, Derry Rundlet was. Yeah.
And all of you actually have stayed close enough to keep supporting Maine Law through the years.
We're devoted to it.
So before we move on to some of the other topics as you move out of 1973, let me get at this, because this is really important, I think, to people who need to understand community support. So the class of 1973, with you at the lead, has taken up the project of having this beautiful room named for Dean Ed Godfrey.
Yes.
And in the course of really a little less than a year, all of your friends and fellow graduates have pulled together sufficient support that we will have a ceremony this summer to dedicate this room to Ed Godfrey. What do you owe that to? Everybody in the class has been so supportive.
Yeah, well, there is an intrinsic devotion to the school in that class, not just in that class, but I can speak for that class because I was in it. But we came away from our experience, not just with Ed Godfrey and Jerry Petrocelli and the teachers, but with the whole school, the school as a whole, and the culture of the school, and just found ourselves thinking very grateful thoughts about the fact that we had chosen to go to a small school that turned out to be just fine. I mean, we all learned well at the school. I don't know what we expected, but we knew we were going to a small state school. It hadn't yet been accredited. We were in the first class, really, that after the accreditation, and we didn't know what we were getting into. And there were many of us that probably could have gotten into more expensive, bigger schools out of state, but we were Mainers. That wasn't the only thing. We also could perceive fairly quickly that this school was worth a lot of consideration, and it panned out beautifully for all of us.
And all of you have had pretty extraordinary careers, if you think about it.
Yeah, the school has produced, I've got the numbers, I can't bring them off the top of my head, but something like 8 out of the last 20 governors.
That's right.
Something to that effect.
Yes.
That's the order of magnitude. And I spent 16 years in the Maine legislature, in the state Senate. And there's a lot of very talented people that go to work every day in that big building up in Augusta, including some of the people who write or rewrite every word that goes into these law books. They were all graduates of Maine Law School. I mean, the contributions from the school of highly talented labor to help write the laws of Maine and to see that they're written properly and quickly, because the legislature is always in a hurry. And I never left the building without first going into the place where the laws were written and I would stand there and just chat with several of them. And I would say, what have you got? What do you know that I don't know? And they would tell, and then they'd say, and then they would pepper me, what's going on up on the floor? And I would tell them. It was just one of these things.
So you're talking about the Office of Policy and Legislative Analysis.
Yes.
We called it OPLA.
Yes.
Yes. So you dropped in there every day.
Yes. I would.
All right.
I would always go.
Let me ask you to hold, because I have so many questions about the legislature and how it worked then, and some of the things that came together while you were in the legislature. Yeah. But you went from Maine law back to Skowhegan, Farmington, to practice law.
I was in Portland. I went with Harry Richardson and several others, and I tried
Bill
cases.
Trobe and
Billy Trobe, yep.
Yep.
And I drove all over the state defending insurance companies and architects and engineers. That was my specialty. I defended architects and engineers who, for the most part, couldn't control the flow of water into the building or something to that effect. I used to give speeches to this effect, is if you can control water in Maine, you're not going to get sued, or not nearly as often. Anyway, I really enjoyed the experience, and then I had an opportunity to take over a law practice up in Skowhegan.
So when you were at what I think was Richardson, Tyler, and Trobe, Harry Richardson was one of the quintessential Maine characters in litigation practice.
Yes.
You were there traveling all over the state. What was it like to work in that firm?
I think we had probably the largest trial department north of Boston. We had a huge flow of cases that came in, typically from insurance companies, to defend situations involving automobile accidents, medical malpractice claims, bad building claims. and we had a specialty in architecture and engineering also, because in Maine, a lot of buildings leak or they have problems, and this lawsuits emerge out of those things. So we did a lot of that, and we were constantly hiring new talent. And where did we look for new talent? Right here. This law school, I personally hired, in my lifetime, I probably hired 15 or 20 people out of this law school.
Speaking of talent at that firm, there was a young woman whose name was Nancy,
Yeah,
who ultimately became
my wife.
Nancy Mills.
Yeah, I hired her.
You did.
Yeah. And then I had an opportunity to take over a pretty significant private law practice up in Skowhegan, and she and I decided to move up there. And Harry Richardson, my senior partner, says, I don't mind if you go, but you're taking Nancy, you bastard. And
So the two of you went together.
yeah. And then Jock McKernan, who was a year behind me in this law school, he was in my writing group, by the way. I was a second-year student teaching writing or something. I don't know. We all did that at that time, and he was in. So I knew Jock pretty well, but he became governor. And then he said, it's about time we had some women on the bench. So he appointed my wife as one of the very early female judges in the Superior Court. And so she got out from working with me, which was, I'm sure it settled very well with her, but in any case, she has been a judge for, she had 31 straight years as a full-time judge, and now she's still a judge for 10 or 15 more years. She's been circulating,
retired,
doing what they call active retired work, but she works almost every day.
So just as a point of personal privilege, Judge and then Justice Mills and I worked together.
Yes, you did.
Throughout. In fact, she was a Chief Justice of the Superior Court when I was Chief Justice on the Law Court.
Yes, indeed.
And I would just say that Harry was right. She is one of the best judges Maine ever had, and one of the people who works harder than anyone I have ever met.
And won't give it up.
And will not.
She's still doing it.
She is an amazing judge and has done, we could talk forever about the Veterans Court, all of the recovery courts that she helped start and maintain through the years. But that's not why we're here, Peter. We're here to figure out exactly how you got from here to there. So, Peter, I'm going to take you back a little bit to your days at Maine Law, because some of the most important introducctory faculty were here when you were here. So, Andy Spanogle, do you remember what he taught?
Very, very vividly.
Ah.
Hard to forget that man. But he taught both contracts and the code.
Oh, good.
And
good
the difference, and you better not confuse the two of them.
So he was.
We took both from him.
But he left, I think, shortly after that to go teach somewhere else. We've lost some great folks through the years, but people like Marty Rogoff, who has stayed with us forever, and has just been absolutely wonderful. Orlando DeLogue was teaching when you were here.
He taught property issues, and
you worked with him one summer.
Yeah, he would go out of his way to find projects where he could employ students to help develop the legal analysis or whatever it was that he was doing. And
when you were here, Harry Glassman was teaching.
Yes, and it was criminal law. And he was another. We had some rough teachers. I mean, they were good teachers.
Yes,
And because they were so good, they were also pretty rough. And Harry was one of those, and he would call on everybody in the room at some point, and you couldn't escape.
There was no escape from the cold call.
But he was kind enough to, if you didn't get it, he would turn to somebody else and keep going. But he was a very effective teacher, and as was his spouse.
I only remember Harry from the bench, and you had better be prepared walking into that courtroom. Very much like Justice Nancy Mills. You had better be prepared and ready to address the cases. So you had, while you were at Maine Law, a wide variety of really terrific faculty. And you went from there to private practice here in Portland, where you traveled all across the state. Yep. Then you had the opportunity to take over a law firm in Skowhegan and Farmington.
It's a somewhat longer story than that, but I used to travel up into Somerset County. The law firm I was in did a lot of tort defense work, but it also did a large amount of workers' compensation defense work. In other words, somebody got hurt in a factory, and there were many factories with many people employed at stitching shoes or working in the paper mills up in Somerset County. And that was a territory that I had a little sports car, and I would have 2 suitcases full of files, and I would go up there and spend 2 weeks going through the workers' comp hearings and paying agreeing to pay money when they were warranted, and I did a lot of that. But the guy it was up against, that was on the other side of a lot of those cases, was a big guy named Carl Wright, and he called me up one time in 1985 and said, I've got diabetes. I can't try cases past noon without taking a nap, and the judge is never going to stand for it. You need to get up here and take over my practice. Just like that, he talked. I said, no, I said, you can't afford me. I'm a big insurance lawyer down in Portland, and I'm doing well, and I don't. He says, you have not seen my tax returns. Well, it took half an hour to change my mind.
So that's how you ended up with Carl Wright.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I knew him. I mean, I had a lot of cases against him and his associates also, and he knew me well, and I knew him well, but I didn't. And the minute I got up there, because of his ill health, he was able to take off to Florida in the winter, and in some ways it saved his life. He continued practicing in the firm off and on for several years.
But he could do it on his own hours.
But he didn't have to do it full time, and it relieved him of the tension. And so we had a very mutually advantageous relationship. And Nancy was with me.
And that firm is still there today.
Yeah, and it's as big as it ever was. It's a good-sized firm.
So I'm hoping at some point we'll get a chance to talk about the fact that you have helped Maine Law with its rural justice program, where we have sent some of our students into summer internships with some of the rural firms to help us address the kind of professional desert that's out there in some of rural Maine. But right now, I want to take you back to, you were practicing in this firm with Carl and with others. At what point did you decide you wanted to run for the legislature?
There was a Senate seat. It represented most of the area was most of Somerset County, which I was, by that time, intimately familiar. And Mickey Marden had been prevailed upon to run for the state Senate, from that area. And he won. Of course he won. Everybody bought stuff in his stores and loved him and so on. He hated it. He calls me up at a time when there was a transition in play or possible, and he says, you've got to take this over. I can't stand this place.
Really?
He did. And he said, this was in the summer, just before the election season. And I said, well, I have been thinking about it, but your encouragement certainly makes a difference. and the fact that he was stepping away from it. And because his name was known by everybody. He was he could have been governor, for crying out loud, if he wanted to. And so he encouraged me to run,
And you ran as a Republican?
Yeah, I stayed a Republican until my sister became governor, and she was a Democrat. And I had run for governor, and I hadn't made it as a Republican. And I asked my sister for advice, and she says, the first thing you do is become a Democrat.
So talk to us about your first term as a legislator in the state of Maine. What did it feel like? Was there collegiality? Did people work across the aisles?
I can't tell you how much in demand. Somebody would come up to me and say, you're a lawyer? I said, yes. I had been a lawyer for quite a while at that point. Can you help me write this?
Oh.
I wrote more legislation for other people than I ever wrote for myself. And I was happy to do it. And I collected, well, if I wanted a vote from those people, I could try to prevail on them. One favor deserves another. But being a lawyer in that setting gave you opportunities that other people just didn't have. And it also put me on a first name basis with everybody down in the basement who was having to write all of this stuff on salary for the legislature. And I would get out and sometimes need advice from them. I'd say, well, I want to say this and do this, but I'm not sure if that's going to work in the books. Oh yeah, well, we can figure that out for you. Let's sit down. And I would get free advice out of them because they could talk to me and I could talk to them. And I very seldom left the building without checking out with them.
So you went from being really junior, brand new, to knowing everybody. Did that make a difference as you continued in the legislature?
Oh, it made running again all the more appealing. Because you say, well, I'm not going to give up now. This is getting fun.
Do you remember the biggest legislative changes that happened while you were in the legislature? Do you think it was the income tax? There were a lot of changes around workers' compensation law.
Yeah, the income
income
tax was passed under the auspices of Governor Ken Curtis before I got there, but at a time when my law partner was head of the Republican caucus in the House, Harry Richardson, and the governor put a tax together. And as Harry would have said, I wasn't too much in favor of I'm a Republican. I wasn't too much in favor of an income tax, but if there was going to be one, I wanted to write it, and he did. And it was fine with. And Ken Curtis says, "That's good. It's a good law." That's how it went. That's
Harry Richardson helped write the income tax law.
Yes, he went and hired an accountant. And the two of them worked it up, and he took it to Ken Curtis and said, "How does this look?" And Ken, he was one of the finest products of this law school, period, in history, because of everything that he managed to do and accomplish. And he was the guy that walked to school. He lived in rural Maine. He walked to a one-room schoolhouse to get through grade school. He went to the Maine Maritime Academy because he thought he'd like to be a sailor. And then for whatever reason, he applied to law school here and got in. And suddenly everybody realized he's brilliant. And he succeeded. And not only in law school, but he got into politics afterwards. And he assembled, he knew how to find intelligent people to work for him. And he filled the State House with people that he hired from out of state in large measure. They're still here, many of them, even though, he's been long gone. But he just did a remarkable job of assembling talent and impressing that talent and giving them things to do that they found exciting. And the structure of state government was entirely reorganized in ways that have held up ever since. And this is, if I had to pick one thing that happened to the state of Maine that was a direct product of this law school, it was Ken Curtis doing that because of the background that he had at this law school. And he got into a position of power, and he was well-liked, and he was smart, and he was able to draw other people around him who could help in areas like the environment, where he was desperate to improve many things, and did. And some of those people that came to help him stayed here and taught college courses and things.
Wow.
So I mean, it was that period of the 60s and 70s was a period when the state went through some major changes. All of that was done as a product, really, of things that were learned and taught at this law school. Yeah. No question.
That is amazing. When you were there, do you remember what committees you served on?
Yeah, there wasn't a committee I didn't serve on. I was on everything.
You served on all?
Yeah, I mean, I kept changing.
Did you have a favorite?
I was on labor quite often and early, and I knew a lot about. I mean, it suited me. And then I was on appropriations several times. I was on education several times. I was famous for not paying any attention to what committee I was on, but showing up at somebody else's committee because I had something that I wanted done. But I was chair. I started out as chair of judiciary.
Oh.
For the first term. And then I didn't stay with it. I didn't stay on that committee.
So during the time you were there, you were overseeing judicial nominations.
I did for a while.
But they were not usually very controversial, and not in Maine.
They're not. No, I mean...
It's not political.
Most governors are pretty good at choosing people that are very likely to be liked and respected for that work. And so there it's not always true, but 90% of the time, those hearings, I won't say they're routine, but they go fairly swiftly.
So I have to ask, because I always thought if I had the bravery to run for the legislature, I would love to serve on on the Appropriations Committee, because your budget really reflects your priorities. When you were on Appropriations, were there controversies around the budget, or were most of them negotiated across the aisles?
Oh, they're almost entirely negotiated, and oftentimes, I won't say pleasantly, but yeah, by agreement. But it requires that there be a number of people on the committee who have spent the time necessary to understand where there can be changes that would be productive. That would be the way to put it.
If you were governor today, what would be your highest priority? What would you do to continue that improvement?
There's any number of things probably that one could make a list of. But the thing that I experienced yesterday that experience overrides everything else. And that is listening to Randy Liberty tell us how he overhauled the criminal justice system in this state. He was appointed by my sister Janet with a lot of encouragement from me and from my spouse, because we all knew Randy Liberty because he was the sheriff next door over in Kennebec County. And he ran the Kennebec County Jail. And he was a godsend to that whole process and to those prisoners. And he very early on, he had extraordinary success in reforming people who had really screwed up. And he was particularly fond of veterans, but he wasn't exclusively so.
So Randy was a veteran himself.
He was, and he had some adverse health issues arising from that experience I'm trying to remember where he was in.
I think he was in Fallujah, but
no, but he was over in the Far East, and he had some rough times. But he had a philosophy about how to manage the lives of these people that were entrusted to him. And
let me set this up, because some of the things that have happened over the last number of years with Randy in charge. Randy was an elected sheriff.
That's right.
In Kennebec County, which has the capital in it, but is not a huge, not a county of enormous population, but a lot of problems. He saw, as the elected sheriff, he was responsible for the jail, the local jail. And in the local jail, he saw a lot of addiction, a lot of PTSD, a lot of violence that was happening as a result of people who had been through really adverse conditions. So in his work in Kennebec County, he undertook a number of fairly revolutionary at the time approaches to those prisoners. Then from there, Governor Janet Mills appointed him as the commissioner, which put him in charge of our prison system.
That's right.
You saw a presentation yesterday.
Yep.
About what has happened in the prison system during the time that Randy has taken over. Tell us what you heard about how he changed what existed in the Maine prison system.
Well, the occasion of the meeting yesterday was to review a book that he and with another author has written. And there's the only thing you can say is it raises the issue of whether the other states in our nation are doing anything like this or doing it even half as well. But he's enlisted. He has a way of finding helpers. He's got the University of Maine in Augusta tied right into helping these prisoners. And there are faculty members at the University of Maine in Augusta who regularly teach courses up at the prison. And when it's called for, when there are takers for it. And they were there yesterday, and they had a lot of comments and questions to ask, and they were very pleased to be there.
And this is the point at which I have to add that the University of Maine School of Law has a clinic
Yes.
that provides civil legal services
Yep.
to prisoners, both at Windham here in southern Maine
Yep.
and in the prisons, that dovetails with some of the work that's going on at UMA. So did he talk about the changes?
Well, they were brought out by, there was a panel of prisoners or former prisoners who came to talk about what had turned them around, and how did it happen, and how did it, my wife and I were walking out in the parking lot on the way out, and this fellow came up and grabbed her by the hand and said, because he had been in the veterans court that she had started, and he said, "I just wanted you to know that when I went to prison, they taught me how to do upholstery." And he said, I own an upholstery company. I have 5 employees.
Oh my Lord, that's amazing.
And he got the essence of it at school, in one of the shops at the prison, for crying out loud, and got good at it somehow. I don't know, but that's not an extreme example. There were any other comments during the day yesterday by people who talked about how they had just been reoriented by being paid attention to. And that was probably the basic theme, which was, instead of just locking these people up and throwing the key away, let's talk with them and find out what they want to do, or what they would do if they have a choice, and then open up those opportunities for them. And there was just a lot of that.
And it made all the difference.
Yeah, let them make a little money in the prison, give them the work to do that could justify, being paid and so forth.
Now, at the same time that Randy was making a huge difference in the prison system, Justice Nancy Mills was making a huge difference in the court system with some of the diversion programs.
Yeah.
Did you hear a lot about what was going on in the court? She had both the Veterans Court, which has the highest success rate in non-recidivism of any of the recovery courts. She also managed the languishing court, where people with mental health problems who would otherwise have been staying far too long in local jails or even in prison were moved into treatment much more quickly. Did you and she talk about that very much?
I heard all about it, and I enjoyed hearing about it. But the sheriff in Cumberland County came to her one time and said, "Can you do anything? I've got all of these people over there who got severe mental problems. We clean up after them. We do whatever we can for them physically, but this is a nightmare. Is there anything you can do?" And she said, "Bring them all over here."
That's exactly right.
Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
Every one of them.
We'll get some diagnostic people in, some shrinks and so forth, and we'll evaluate what their needs are, and if they can be helped with services that aren't available in a jail, by all means, let's get it done. But it takes a lot of effort and that's still going on.
Absolutely.
And the sheriffs are so relieved, because they want to help too, or they want to see them helped, but they don't have the resources to do it.
It's a consistent problem. So let me move you now to access to justice in rural Maine.
All right.
You've been wonderful. Your firm has taken interns, and in fact, one of our graduates, I think, is at your firm.
He graduated in the class of 19, and he is one of the lead trial lawyers in Somerset County.
And thank you for that, because that would not have happened without your firm's willingness to take this on. One of the things that we're seeing in every state, and talking with deans in other states, I hear a lot about this, is that our rural counties really have a professional desert. The doctors, dentists, veterinarians, some of the specialized education is just disappearing from the rural counties, and along with it, legal services. So if you live in a rural county, you're a very long way away from a lawyer if you need one. Do you have ideas about how we can be addressing that across Maine? You know, we have the wonderful rural summer program. We have a clinic in Fort Kent now, which has made a big difference. We have externships with some of the law firms in the rural areas. What can we be doing to help people in rural Maine?
I have very strong feelings about it because I live up there, and one of the first things I did when I graduated from law school is I was assigned to go recruit new lawyers. Harry Richardson says, our firm is way overworked. We don't have enough lawyers. You just got here, I know, but if you ever want to get out of here on weekends, you better go find some other lawyers who can do what we do for work and do it well. And I did, and I enjoyed that immensely. And we did hire some people who are still alive and still practicing. In fact, one of the ones I hired is now the owner of the firm, John Whitman.
John Whitman.
Yeah, who was Harvard Law School, but he was quite something else. Harry wasn't sure about hiring him because he had. This is a long story, and it doesn't. But John Whitman got out of Harvard Law School and got a job immediately for the U.S. Senate, working to impeach the president, Nixon. And the minute he took the job and moved down to Washington, Nixon resigns, and John lost his job, and he went south and began, just for whatever reason, I don't know, he started timing race cars. And he, one of the guys
Wait, John Whitman?
Yes.
Was timing race cars?
Timed race cars, and he came to know one of the most famous of them all, of the stock car races.
Oh, Richard Petty.
Well, John says it properly, because this is how they say it over the speakers. Richard Petty!
That's great.
And John can imitate him. And Richard came to him and said, I need an autobiography. Are you going to write it? So John wrote the not the biography, the autobiography of Richard Petty.
Wow.
And it's available. I went online and I found a copy. I haven't bought it yet, but I think I'll go buy one. But John wrote, that's what he did with his life out of law school.
Was that was before he came back to Maine?
But he came back to Maine because his girlfriend was an artist, and she wanted to live on the islands out here. And Horace Hildreth's wife was an artist. And he comes into work one day and he says, Harry, I got somebody new here, this law student. He went to Harvard, and he wants to know if we got any work for him. And Harry said, I don't think so. He's not too serious about it. He's been down south screwing around with it. Harry thought he hadn't practiced yet, and so it wasn't a good signal here.
John went, wow.
And I intervened. I said, I have a proposition. I said, let's hire him. We don't put him on the letterhead. We'll have him do some work around here, and if it pans out, eventually we'll put him on the letterhead and announce his arrival formally. Well, he started writing stuff for I remember vividly, one of my law partners, went to law school with me, what's his name? He became a judge later. Anyway, John wrote a nice paper for this, one of the law partners, and the guy says, he went to Harry and he says, I can't use this thing. He says, the judge knows I don't write this well.
And so he stayed.
John stayed, and now John owns the whole firm.
Yes, there you go. Wow.
But that's how things happen. I spent a large part of my early career recruiting. If I spent an hour, I could write down about a dozen names. I have personally hired more graduates of the law school, I think, than anybody else has. Only because it was my job. It was given to me by Harry Richardson and other people, and we just hired a lot, and we hired every summer. And I do that up home now. We put out the word that we will welcome summer interns there, and you don't have to worry about travel because we have an apartment in the law office, and people can stay there.
Oh,
free. I mean, it's just a. Nancy and I lived in there when we first moved up there, and before that, Carl had used it. It's a long story, but there's been the whole upstairs of the office was a big apartment at one time. But this part of it is still available. And
so the impecunious young graduates have a place to stay until they get their feet under them.
Yeah, and we will.
That's wonderful.
We will accommodate. We'll make. We had one last summer, and she came from Oregon, and she wanted to go home and practice law there. And I said, God bless you, and you'll do well.
Yeah.
But she spent the summer with us, and she stayed in the apartment sometimes, and sometimes she went back to her apartment south of here. But the distance issue, the distance and the accommodation issue has to be addressed because nobody wants to commute.
Right.
Well, they shouldn't have to, and yet they should. They don't have to. We tell them you don't have to stay here all summer either. You want to go back to your apartment, or you got parents you want to go home and see. Do it, but stay with us as much as you can, and we will accommodate you.
And it has worked really well.
Yeah, there's all kinds of people that. Yeah, I mean we've got one of the busiest trial lawyers in Somerset County went through that.
All right, let me take you to a completely different topic. Are you ready? Did you like running for governor?
Which time? I ran twice, and I thought I might win the second time. I thought it was my turn at that point, and I didn't like it. I mean, I liked it, but I didn't like the outcome.
Who were you? Tell us who you were running against, because I'm going to forget this.
The problem is I've already forgotten it.
Probably good.
Paul LePage was in the second time around, and I believe there were 3 or 4 of us in the Republican sector who would have been good candidates, frankly.
Yep.
And he beat all of us. And that was the second time around. That was the last time I ran, I think.
Here's the reason I asked whether you liked it. You know that my Chief Justice, Dan Wathen, left the court right after 9/11, wanted to do something different, ran for governor for 3 months, 4 months, and then withdrew from the race. And he told us, not unlike Carl Wright's response to things, he just didn't like running for office. People expected easy answers, fast answers. They didn't want thoughtful or complex answers, which he had been accustomed to giving throughout his judicial career. So it takes a very special person, I think, to run for office and be able to respond to the public's request for a simple, easy answer to life's great difficulties. I watched you out on the campaign, and you were great at that. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, no, I got a kick out of it. I came to it with some pretty succinct ideas, succinct ways of expressing what I wanted to get out. I don't know how else to say it, but I didn't come at it with any lengthy
right
presentations, and I tried to keep it pretty succinct, because I knew that much.
And you traveled through the whole state.
Yeah, I did.
And pounded signs into lawns in so many places.
We learned a lot. I mean, I one of the things I learned is drive right. I've advised other people since, and I say, go right up the presque aisle and go to the local newspaper and walk right in. You're the news that day. You know that? You just arrived, and you will be the news. Don't just do it. Don't make appointments.
Just go.
And then come in with something to say. I don't know what, but think of something, and you'll be the headline. because they're starved for attention, and the press in particular doesn't know what to write up there half the time. And the TV doesn't either. So go over there and walk in, and they'll sit and they'll say, "Oh, sit right down there. Get the camera." And you're it. You're the news for the night. I said, so that's rural Maine. I mean, rural Maine loves you, will love you because of the attention that you're paying.
Yes.
And I found that fun. And I had a driver and me, and I'd say, look, I'd drive into town, wherever the town was, and where's the damn TV station?
And you would go right to the TV
We'd walk
station.
right in.
Wow.
So we've come up here today to say hello to you folks. And it was fun to do it. I'll be honest, I get a kick out of it.
That's great. That's great. Well,
And law school helped me.
I think people responded well to
If you could stand up to one of Andy Spanogel's questions on the code, you could talk to the press in Presque Isle.
So let's now move to your most recent career at the Maine Turnpike Authority. You had to go in and clean up some, what shall we call it, problems.
What happened was I was out. I'd lost the race for governor in June, and this was late fall of the same year. And I was out in I have about 500 acres of woodland that we live on, and I was trying to get the trails ready for skiing in the winter, and using my chainsaw and everything, and the phone went off. And the DOT commissioner is on the phone, he's a friend of mine. He says, can you get a suit and tie and dress up a little bit tomorrow? Come down here and take over the Maine Turnpike Authority? I said, wow. He says, you got to put your predecessor in jail and then collect $500,000 from him because we think he still has a lot.
Did you know that this was happening there?
No. But
no.
They just told me on the.
They called you and told you what you would have to do.
I was standing in the woods with my cell phone. He says, just come down and that's the job. You got to put him out, participate in getting him put to jail, but also get as much money as you can find.
Wow.
Trace down the resources, calculate how much is gone. It was quite something. But
and you found a suit. And
yeah,
got
I
on
suit
down
out of
there.
the closet, and I had 14 years down there.
Wow.
I didn't realize I would simply stay, but we got the interest. Oh, the best part of it. The first day I arrived, I got a call from Peter to Troy, and he says, "I got to tell you what I'm going to do." He says, "I'm representing this fellow that you're replacing." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, I'm going to give you a divorce questionnaire. And we're going to disclose every damn thing he owns and where it is.
Oh.
Just the way you would do for a divorce." He says, "That's coming to you tomorrow."
Wow.
And I said, "I think what you want is a favorable speech at the sentencing." He says, "You got it." This is really great about when you got two lawyers who.
Did you speak at the sentencing?
Yeah.
Wow.
I just explained that the impact on the organization, because there were people that would drive up to a toll booth, having read the newspaper about what was going on at the turnpike, and they would take 100 pennies, which is the dollar that you owe at that toll booth, and throw it right at the poor guy behind the gate.
So let's tell the audience what actually happened before you arrived. What was it that was reaching the headline? Your predecessor.
He was managing a lot of revenue that flows into a turnpike. I mean, my God, you're collecting money every day at the toll booths, and some of it comes in by mail and other places. But anyway, the organization is fairly wealthy with money, but it needs to be, because you have to pave those roads over again every summer, and there's all kinds of revenue that's needed in order to maintain that road. So it's a long story, but it's also possible, if you're the leader of the organization, to enjoy travel, for example. And he became president of the international. There's an international organization
of
turnpikes.
Directors.
Yes, no, turnpikes.
Oh, of turnpikes.
International memberships.
Wow.
And if you were the president of it, it would justify your going over to Italy just to check out what's going on over there. And there was a lot of flying around and interesting dinners, and we tracked a lot of that down. But and there were just things he spent money on
that were not appropriate. So you had to come in, clean up all of the auditing.
Well, thanks to my friend Peter Detroit, he turned over his net worth. He owned an apartment and other stuff. He turned it over to us, and I said, "Whoa!" But we were still short, so I wrote we had insurance. Right? We had insurance for travelers, and I sent a letter off to them, and I said, here's an accounting of everything that we think we've lost. And that was a big job, and we got it done. Mm-hmm. And we sent it off to the insurance company, and I said, but I got this much back out of the fellow that did it, but I'm missing, I think it was $250,000, something like that. I got a check in the mail by return. They said, thanks for doing our job. Because they would have had to chase. I could have claimed the whole thing against the company and then made them chase him. And they said, thank you for doing that.
You did all the work for them.
I didn't do it. Peter Detroit did it for me too. So I mean, when you get good lawyers on the phone,
yep,
trying to make progress on something, they don't fool around. Peter Detroit knew it was inevitable that he was going to go to jail, and the point would be to try to keep that down to a dull road. Try not any more than necessary, but the best way to do that is to make him entirely cooperative with trying to remedy what he did that was wrong. Peter had such insight. But that's what a good law school education teaches you.
Absolutely agree. Now, there is an apocryphal story about you leaning on a bond company in New Jersey. You convinced the person deciding whether or not to provide the bond by telling him, go ahead, now you tell the story.
It wasn't a bond, it was a rating.
Oh, it was a rating you were looking for.
The Maine Turnpike survives on having a very good rating because it's what you borrow money on the basis of. And there was a guy from New Jersey who spoke like he was from New Jersey. I can't imitate him, but it was really thick. And he was one of the people that decides what your bond rating is going to be. This guy did not like my predecessor. He was seeing through, before it was public, he saw through and knew he didn't like this guy. And so we went down there. We would go down to talk about getting what our new rating would be for the year or whatever. And I gave him a story. I said, we're vacation land up there. And I said, we're a cheap date. And I said, we got tons of traffic coming in. Why is that? And I said, the reason is there was something wrong with the economy, and I can't remember what it was. But I said, people like you down here in New Jersey can't afford to fly out to Vail anymore. I said, you're getting into your Suburban and you're driving up this Sugarloaf, and we're welcoming you. And that's why our traffic is up. I said, we're a cheap date.
And he bought it.
He says, you're right. You guys you get more traffic than we thought you would have. I said, yeah, we get good traffic. I gave him the cheap date speech, and he gave us a rating increase. Just a few words.
All right, Peter, this has really been quite wonderful. What else would you like students of the future to know about the Maine legal community?
Well, there are many ways in which the Maine legal community, including the law school even, itself, make the wheels turn here in Maine. We're a small state, and there aren't a whole lot of lawyers floating around. Every town has them, but wherever they are, in any town that they live in or have a practice in, they are a major participant in the success of the community. That's just the way it is, and because so many of the towns are relatively small, and are there aren't a lot of places you can go to get legal help. If you're in business, you're turning to your friend the lawyer quite often for guidance, and that's just small town practice. That's just the way we are.
Do you think AI is going to change that?
Maybe, but I haven't figured out how to use it. I mean,
Join the crowd.
I understand the principles of it, and it almost disgusts me. Somebody's thinking for me or pretending to. I don't know. I tell you, I'm biased against it because it doesn't belong in schools. My mother was a creative writing teacher, was the English teacher, and she would be horrified that somebody could fake it with a machine. I mean, it offends everything I was brought up to believe in. But I think but as people keep saying, if you learn how to use it and understand its limitations and use it as a prop to open up a subject matter and penetrate it and then adapt it to your own use, in other words, use it as a tool and you're intelligent enough to reframe whatever comes out of it, I don't know. I think I suppose someday I'll be using it, but I haven't yet.
Not yet.
But it will be with great circumspect, caution.
So for students who will graduate over this next 3-5 year period, they will have to know what AI is and how to use it. They will have to help their clients use it ethically and appropriately.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to change the way lawyers are thinking and working with their clients?
Yeah, I think it's a tool that is it's unavoidable that people in all professions where there's creative writing involved, it doesn't matter if it's in business or if you're in advertising or if you're legal. I don't think it works in medicine. although this, you can give it a problem and say, gee whiz, is this kind of cancer going to be cured with this medicine? Whoa, wait a minute. But it will be answering those questions someday, or maybe already is. But I don't know. I think it's going to be one of the challenges of the future. There are seminars being given already on how to put AI to work in your law practice.
So my last question to you is really about the thing that troubles me most about the world we live in and the way law is practiced. And that is, over time, it seems to me that the civility that you talk about, pick up the phone, solve the problem, the collegiality, the personal connections that allow us as a profession to solve problems is falling away. People are drawing off into their own corners. There's not as much effort to be human, lawyer to lawyer. There's not as much effort to pick up that phone. There's less civility in this profession that we love. Do you think I'm wrong? I would love to hear that you do. And if not, what can we at Maine Law be doing to help with civility, to help people who have completely different ideas or philosophies talk to each other across the great divide?
Somehow, when they get out of law school, I mean, law school isn't the place where your survival depends a great deal on any relationships that you have with other lawyers or other students or the professors. I mean, this idea of picking up the phone and getting something done grows on you when you get out of law school and you start accumulating problems on your desk where somebody is paying you to go get it sorted out, and then it begins to dawn on you, gee, maybe I just ought to call this other guy. And you start thinking, and then you see your senior partners doing it all the time because they know. that you got to be a Billy Trobe. I'll give you a good example. Former mayor of Portland, but a lawyer who could solve any problem, and did solve many divorces, all kinds of things, and was a go-to guy to get the work done, to get the controversy resolved. That's more accurate. And when I was in law school, my father was U.S. attorney down here. My father would invite me to come down just to have lunch with him, but to have lunch with everybody else who showed up. There was a table which sat about 10 or 12 lawyers. Not people, lawyers. They all went there. And I'm just a student, but I am all ears to what's going on. And it was enormously informative. I learned more about the practice of law in half an hour, slopping soup. And I mean, just listening to the good old boys going at it and actually getting a lot done around the table and smoothing off differences.
Maybe that's what we need. We need
Yeah.
lunch tables with lawyers.
Yeah.
Lunching with lawyers. There you go.
I don't see it up home in Skowhegan. I don't see it anywhere. I see people getting on the phone. And yesterday I spent 40 minutes with a lawyer I'd never met. She and I are going to resolve this issue. We damn well are going to
find a way to do it.
Why? Because we hit it off.
So it's still happening.
Oh yeah. No, I got to tell you, I thrive on that.
That's great.
I mean, I couldn't justify my existence without having the capacity, along with others, to reach over the phone line or reach over the coffee cup or whatever it is, and just saying, "Don't you think this ought to come out this way? What do you think? What do you think?" And asking questions and getting people to open up, and then having them do the same to you. Those things, they evolve over time, and you learn them. You develop them because they work, and it happens outside of here. I mean, you could have a course where you describe this process. I could do that. I could teach a course in it for at least 20 minutes and say, here's how it happens, and then give them some anecdotes like the one with Peter Troy. We're not going. I could have spent forever tracing down all of this guy's assets, demanding this and that and all of this, but he just short-circuited everything. And Peter was one of those lawyers that could do that thought ahead like that.
Peter, over the years, you have had a career that has been quite varied. You've been in the Navy, you've been in private practice, you have been in the legislature, you've helped Maine Law through the foundation. You've had this wide variety of both roles and jobs. People have picked up the phone and said, I need you to come to the Turnpike Authority. I need you to come to my law firm. What do you attribute that to?
There's something to be said for taking pleasure in the challenges. And it is, like the Turnpike thing. When I got that call out in the woods to get down, I didn't know it was going to take me 14 years before I tell you, it finally happened. I think I got into a long discussion with Dan Wathen. He and I are about the same age, and he said, do we have a succession plan here? He's speaking about himself and me. We both laughed. We both said, yeah, no, it's about time we developed one. We got out. But no, it's...
Is it the love of a different challenge?
There's so many things. If you've got a creative mind and a relatively congenial approach, which is crucial for most of this. But if you enjoy dealing with people and you enjoy making them happy, best yet, making two people happy who aren't getting along, those are big days. Those are nice. Those are days you remember. You get some divorce mediated and they walk out and the kids are fine. Those are great days. I mean, those don't happen all the time. But they happen a lot under the auspices of a creative lawyer. No, the opportunity to make people better and to make them feel better and to make them happy. There's no other profession, frankly, in the world, I think, even medicine, that can create opportunities like that to give people a sense of pleasant resolution. Those are wonderful times, and it can happen frequently in the practice of law.
Oh, what a great way to put it. Love that.
And you go home and you're ready for a beer. It's been a good day. No, I mean, it's
good. That is a good day.
I mean, yes, it can happen in other professions. Don't get me wrong. But the legal profession, your whole job is to figure out, how can I make both of these people happy? And when you succeed at it, or when you've catalyzed it, made it move toward happiness or to resolution, it's extremely satisfying when you have a day like that, where something really good has happened to both sides.
And where else can you get that but the practice of law?
And the training.
Across so many.
And you can't get the training except here.
Right.
I mean, you can, but you don't get, the training here is basic and essential to getting started in practicing dispute resolution or mediation or whatever it is. A lot of good lawyers now are getting out of, they don't want to go to court and make people unhappy by challenging each other. They want to be mediators. And that's fine for a certain amount of that. But there are certain things that you get to, mediation is more of an end run, and you need more things are resolved by two lawyers who just get on the phone. And it's not a mediation, it's just say, shouldn't this come out this way? Yeah, you got a point there. But, and then you give a button. But two lawyers talking, the best art, there's one thing that I handed out, I remember at a graduation several years ago, that I probably should send you again so it could be in this room. But it's an article, it was a nationwide legal journal where the guy wrote a story he heard that the Aroostook County Bar was going to go down the river together, because they did frequently. And he joined them. And he wrote all about what happened, because these guys were so congenial with each other going down the river. And so, and it talked about how they resolved disputes all the time. And then he said, and there was another paragraph about how to resolve disputes with some asshole from Portland. and they quoted this guy. They said, he calls up, lawyer from Portland, sent out a whole bunch of written interrogatories, paperwork, which they hate. Found its way up to Presque Isle, and the lawyer on the other side, who received all of that, calls him up and he says, you need any information from me again? You just you pick that damn phone up and you ask me and you'll get it. He didn't want any damn paperwork. and they practice law that way. And they'd meet each other in the entrance to the courtroom, and one of them would say, give me your file, I want to know what the hell you've got. You can have mine. That's how they did it. The article is just full of stories about the deep pleasure they took every day in relating to each other and resolving other people's challenges. It's one of the best articles ever written about the practice of law. I scanned it into my laptop. I carry it everywhere.
That's great. I'd love to read it again.
It's the graduate course in being a good lawyer. And it was all about rural Maine, too.
Fabulous.
And how to manage the river and all of that. I mean, it was just funny. And you and I are old enough to know all of those names.
Yeah.
And you would appreciate some of their comebacks.
Peter, this has been absolutely wonderful. I am so grateful for your time. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being the inaugural interviewee for Maine Law Matters.
Well, I'm very pleased that you thought of me. I enjoy talking about the practice of law.